Hey guys, welcome to the Real Deal video blog. And this week I want to talk to you about an issue that affects a lot of people who are in recovery, especially people who are in early recovery in that first 6 months or that first year of being sober. And I think this is an issue that probably many of you have seen firsthand. So, you know the type, the guy who gives up drinking and cocaine and yet he seems to be constantly smoking cigarettes and drinking energy drinks or drinking coffee. It really seems like he has a problem with it. Or maybe you know someone who got sober, but they seem to go to the casino every weekend and lose all their money gambling. Or maybe they're part of the latest craze, speculating on cryptocurrencies or doing it the old-fashioned way and speculating on the financial markets. But whichever way you want to describe it, it seems like this person probably has a gambling problem, right? Or the person who dates obsessively, the person who seems to be on a date with someone new, taking someone new home every other day, constantly getting new pictures of themselves for their dating profiles and meeting up with someone new, constantly chatting, constantly on their phone. And what about the fitness freak, the person who never misses a workout, the person who loses their mind if they miss a workout, the person who obsesses over their diet and it seems like they're in the gym more often than they're at home. So I've just described several different forms of addiction. And the thing about these forms of addiction are these are things that can easily happen after you've gotten sober. Like if you've made a decision to get sober and put aside all mind-altering substances, obviously you're not going to develop a cocaine addiction because you're not using cocaine. But there's nothing really in the literature about like gambling or exercise, things like that. So these are all things that you might call cross addiction. And cross addiction is when you get sober, but you find something else that fills that void and you become dependent on that instead. Some really common ones are gambling, sex, food, exercise, video games, and there are many others. The possibilities are pretty much endless because just about anything can be a cross addiction. All it has to do is hit that reward center of your brain. If you've spent years using drugs and alcohol, sobriety takes some serious getting used to. It can feel pretty weird not to have that dopamine rush all the time, not to have that reward center of your brain push all the time. So you might start looking for it in other places, and it's really common to do that. It's normal. It happens all the time. So you find something new, you find something you like doing, but the next thing you know, you've developed a cross addiction. You're doing it all the time, you feel like you can't stop, and it might even be causing some serious problems. And, it goes just like regular addiction. At first, things aren't really that bad. It's way better than the drug and alcohol addiction was, right? But over time, if that issue isn't addressed, it can cause just as many problems. So what do you do about it? The best thing is not to develop the cross addiction in the first place, but that's kind of a stupid answer. That's easier said than done, right? Let's say we're already in that situation where we have someone who has a cross addiction. So that's where I think it's really, really important to have a support network. That's where that support network, that recovery community comes in. If you've surrounded yourself with loving, caring people who actually care what happens to you, and this is something you should be doing already in recovery, you'll have people who will hold you accountable and work through it with you. For example, if you go to 12-step meetings and you have people around you and you have a sponsor, these people will call you out on this, even if you haven't identified the problem in yourself. And so sometimes dealing with it could include something like step work, or it might mean seeking out a therapist or even another support group. Some people end up in Alcoholics Anonymous and then later end up in Gambling Anonymous or Sex Addiction Anonymous. And there's quite a few different roads that can be taken to resolve this issue, and sometimes it kind of resolves itself. But the good news is it gets easier over time. people in early sobriety tend to be fragile. They tend to fall back into their old ways, but over time they adjust to living a normal life, and they can moderate these rewarding activities much more easily. I'm not a neuroscientist or anything like that, but I understand that the brain chemistry gets all screwed up in addiction, and over time in sobriety it returns to normal, and it's easier for them to behave in a normal way. Now, something like gambling or nicotine is probably never a good idea. You're probably better off just letting those things go entirely, but, no judgment from me, of course, if that is what you're into. But I can promise you that certain things enjoyed in moderation, like food, dating, and exercise, those can be totally healthy, and those can be a part of your life, and they can be a healthy part of your life. A normal life in recovery is very much possible. You might just have to work for it a little bit.